You've been solving the wrong problem your entire life. The hidden science inside Autobiography of a Yogi. Everyone says they want to change their life. They picture the other version of themselves. The one with the money, the freedom, the purpose. The one who wakes up and actually wants to be alive. It is a nice fantasy, and it leaves out the truth, because the truth is darker and stranger than the fantasy ever admits. There is a book sitting on a shelf right now in more than 4 million homes around the world. It has been continuously in print since 1946. It has never been debunked, never been quietly explained away, never gone out of fashion. And almost no one talks about what is actually written inside it. Steve Jobs kept a copy for the last decade of his life. It was the one book he chose to give away at his own memorial, handed to every guest in a small box after he was already gone. He did not do that for a book of nice ideas. Across technology, music and science, serious people, people who built empires and rewrote entire fields, have kept circling back to this same book for almost 80 years. These are not soft, superstitious people, and they all seem to arrive at the same place. Here is what nobody tells you. I am not going to give you the safe version of this book. The safe version keeps it charming, inspiring, and completely useless. I'm going to tell you what it actually documents, what it claims to prove, and why, if even a fraction of it is true, you have been solving the wrong problem your entire life. The book is Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And this is what those people kept seeing inside it. The book documents, with named witnesses, verifiable dates, and signed, notarized letters, events that should not be physically possible. A woman named Giribala took in 0 food and 0 water for more than 50 years. Not a reduced diet, nothing, for over half a century. She was investigated by a local Maharaja, examined by physicians, watched around the clock, and documented. When Yogananda finally sat with her and asked directly how, she did not call it a miracle. She described a specific yogic technique she had been taught as a young woman, one that redirected her body's dependence away from external food and toward an internal source of energy. She called it a science she had learned and practiced. A saint named Swami Pranabananda was seen in 2 separate cities at the very same moment. Not one confused account, multiple independent witnesses in both places at once, with no possibility of travel between them. There is a word for this: bilocation. And Yogananda does not present it as a wonder. He presents it as the predictable result of a specific understanding of the relationship between consciousness and physical form. The man had learned something about the nature of the body that made being in one place stop being a law and start being a choice. A yogi rose off the ground during meditation. Not symbolically. His body left the earth in front of witnesses, and it was documented. Yogananda describes it the way an engineer describes a plane leaving a runway. Not with awe, but with the flat clarity of someone reporting a result he expected from a process he understood. And then there is the event that has never been explained away. Yogananda's own teacher, Sri Yukteswar, died, and his body was taken to a mortuary. What happened in the days after was documented by the mortuary's own director in a signed, notarized letter that was later published and reported in the press. The body showed zero signs of decay. Not slow decay. None. For 20 days. That letter exists. It is not disputed. It has never been refuted. It simply sits there in the record, unexplained. Now, here is where almost everyone makes the same mistake. When people meet evidence like this, they do one of two things. They dismiss it as fraud, or they inflate it into a miracle. And those two reactions, which feel like opposites, do exactly the same job. Both of them let you stay precisely where you are. Both of them stop you from asking the only question that actually matters. What if it is neither? What if these events are not fakes and not miracles, but the documented results of a science that most of the world walked away from before it could understand it? Because that is exactly how Yogananda treats them. He says, in effect, here is what happened. Here is the mechanism behind it. Here is the ancient framework that predicted it 2,000 years before anyone witnessed it. And here is why it is repeatable by anyone willing to do the work. That framework is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, written roughly 2,000 years ago. 196 short verses, and encoded inside them, with the precision of a technical manual, is a complete map of the relationship between consciousness and physical reality. Patanjali did not call these abilities miracles. He called them siddhis, perfections, natural outcomes. He listed them the way a chemistry text lists reactions, not as marvels, but as predictable consequences of understood processes applied correctly. He described levitation in the same clinical tone he used for concentration. He described living without food the same way he described breathing. He wrote about a scientist's map, not a believer's poem. And this matters because Patanjali was not a spiritual teacher in the way we use that phrase today. He was a systematizer. He took the accumulated experimental results of thousands of years of inner investigation by hundreds of practitioners across many traditions and compressed them into those verses with the economy of a mathematical proof. He does not say perhaps or in some cases. He says, do this under these conditions for this length of time, and these results will follow, inevitably. The same way a physicist says, apply this force to this mass and this acceleration will result. His central claim is the one that every tradition, from ancient Egypt to Persia to Taoist China, seems to have pointed at independently, from completely different directions, in completely different language. It is this: physical reality is not the foundation. Consciousness is the foundation. Physical reality is downstream, and a consciousness trained to sufficient depth can change what shows up downstream in ways the untrained mind can only file under impossible. That is the claim. And the question I want you to sit with before we go one step further is not whether you believe it. The question is what it would mean for your actual life if it were even 30% true. Because if consciousness shapes reality even partially, then most of what you are doing to change your life is aimed at the wrong layer. You are working on the screen while the projector runs unchanged. You are rearranging the furniture while the blueprint underneath keeps producing the same floor plan, room for room. And that points at something you have felt, but were probably never given accurate words for. There is a kind of stuck that is not laziness. It is not lack of information. It is not even lack of effort. You are working. You are trying. You have read the books, run the systems, taken the courses. And you keep hitting the same ceiling, the same income level, the same relationship dynamic with a different person each time. The same self-sabotage at the exact moment things start to go well. You have been told this is a discipline problem, a mindset problem, an execution problem. It is none of those. What Yogananda understood and what Patanjali mapped with unnerving precision 2,000 years ago is that every stuck point in a human life is a surface expression of a pattern running at a layer your conscious mind cannot directly reach. You cannot see it from where you are standing. You cannot think your way down to it. And every fix you apply at the surface, more effort, a better strategy, a new city, fails to move it, because you are not working at the layer where it actually lives. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable thing in the entire book. Not the levitation, not the bilocation. It is this. Yogananda describes in precise detail how the outer world a person lives in is, at every moment, a perfect mirror of the inner world they are running. Not a rough approximation, not a general tendency, a mirror. The quality of your relationships reflects the quality of your relationship with yourself. The ceiling on your income reflects a buried belief about what level of reality belongs to someone like you. The problems that keep recurring are the same internal pattern wearing different costumes, showing up again and again, trying to get your attention. This is what the yogic tradition means by karma. Not karma as punishment, not karma as a cosmic scorecard. Karma as precise feedback. A system that returns to you in external form the exact content of your internal state, with the accuracy of a mirror, without exception. And here is why that is one of the most important things anyone can tell you about why you are stuck. If your external life is a mirror of your internal state, then changing the external without changing the internal is not just difficult, it is impossible. The mirror will always update to match the source. You leave the relationship and find the same dynamic with a new face. You change jobs and rebuild the same frustrations with a new team. You move cities and carry the pattern with you in your luggage. The reflection changes, the thing underneath does not. But there is a part of this teaching that people rush past because it sounds so empowering at first. You create your reality, therefore you can change it. True. And it has a shadow side that lands like cold water. If your external life is a perfect mirror of your internal state, then you are responsible for all of it. Not some of it, all of it. The parts you are proud of and the parts you are ashamed of. The wins and the failures. The people who hurt you and the patterns that walked you toward them. This is the most confronting idea in the whole framework, and it is also the most liberating, because responsibility is the only thing that ever gives you power. The moment you accept that the source of your circumstances is internal, you gain a kind of leverage that no amount of external effort could ever hand you. Most people will not accept this. It is easier to keep believing the world is doing things to you, that the ceiling is the economy, the competition, the timing, your background. Those explanations feel true because they come with surface evidence. But they are not the cause. They are the reflection. The cause is always upstream. And Patanjali spent his life mapping exactly how to get upstream. His starting discovery is this: the ordinary human mind runs an enormous amount of energy through a very small, very noisy processing system. The surface mind, the part you experience as you're thinking, you're reacting, you're planning, you're worrying, is like a generator running flat out while most of its output bleeds away as heat. Most of the energy your consciousness produces is lost into reaction, into rumination, into the constant low static of a mind commenting on everything it touches. And beneath that noise, there is another layer of awareness, one that is different in kind, different in its quality, its power, and its relationship to physical reality. Patanjali calls it Purusha, pure consciousness, the witness, the field of awareness that underlies every experience without being defined by any of it. His entire system, all the practices and stages, is one precise protocol for making the journey from the surface noise down into that deeper layer. Here is why that journey changes everything. The surface mind stands at the effect end of reality. Things happen and it reacts. Circumstances arise and it responds. It experiences reality as something that happens to it. The deeper layer, pure awareness, stands at the causal end. It is not downstream of physical reality. In Patanjali's framework, physical reality is downstream of it. That is the inversion the whole system is built on. And before you file that under mysticism, notice that physics spent the last century circling something uncomfortably close. The observer effect, tested and confirmed and never explained away, shows that the act of observation changes what is observed at the smallest scales of reality. Reality, at its foundation, does not behave as though it is fully independent of the consciousness watching it. Patanjali was pointing at that relationship 2,000 years before the experiment existed. Not as a theory, but as something his lineage claimed to have observed directly, from the inside, after training awareness to the depth where the link between mind and matter becomes visible. So the siddhis, the levitation and the rest, are not the goal of the system. They are the evidence. They are what shows up at the far extreme when consciousness has been trained deeply enough that the line between the observer and the observed goes soft. And they sit at the end of a spectrum that begins with something far more ordinary and far more available to you. Cleaner perception, sharper intuition, and a real, growing ability to direct your own life. That ordinary end of the spectrum is not exotic. A consciousness trained even partway toward its deeper layer starts to experience reality differently. Problems that looked fixed begin to move. Patterns that looked structural begin to dissolve. Opportunities appear that were invisible before, not because the world changed, but because the perceiver changed. Decisions get clearer. Relationships get more honest. The gap between what you intend and what actually happens starts to close, with a consistency that effort alone could never explain. That is what is on offer. And here is the part that keeps most people out. It requires you to go somewhere almost everyone avoids. Not somewhere distant or exotic, somewhere immediately available and almost completely unvisited. A place inside you that is deeper than your thoughts, quieter than your reactions, and more real than anything the surface mind has ever shown you. Most people will not go there, not because it is hard, though it is, because going there means meeting what you have been running from. And what you have been running from is the actual source of everything in your life that is not working. That is the cost. That is always the cost. The clarity is free. What you find in the clarity is not. So let me give you the specific discoveries from this book, the ones that, once you understand them, make the popular self-help conversation look like people arguing about how to arrange the furniture in a burning building. The book documents again and again practitioners reading the thoughts of the people around them, not vaguely sensing a mood, reading specific thoughts. Yogananda describes his own teacher correcting him for thoughts he had not spoken, sometimes thoughts he had barely finished forming. He describes meeting saints who, on a first encounter with a stranger, named specific memories, specific fears, specific patterns the person had never told anyone. Patanjali encodes this as a siddhi, direct knowledge of another mind. He treats it as a natural consequence of a specific stage of development, the way sight is a natural consequence of working eyes, a faculty that becomes available when the noise of your own mind drops below a certain level. Here is what that means for you today, with no meditation required. The people around you are already receiving your internal state, whether you say a word or not. Your anxiety in a negotiation is legible. Your doubt on a sales call lands before you open your mouth. Your resentment in a relationship transmits whether or not you ever name it. You are broadcasting continuously, and the people around you are picking it up below their own awareness and responding to the broadcast, not to the performance you are putting on top of it. This is why the most magnetic person in a room is not always the most skilled performer. It is the person whose inner state is genuinely coherent, whose broadcast and whose words are the same thing. There is no gap between the transmission and the speech, and people feel that coherence without being able to name it. The book also documents people who knew the future, not vaguely, specifically. Yogananda's teacher told him years ahead exactly what a major life event would be and the date it would happen. It happened on that date. This is not offered as prophecy in the religious sense. It is offered as a consequence of reaching a layer of reality where linear time is simply less binding than it is at the surface. Patanjali encodes this too. Knowledge of past and future, listed as a natural outcome of a specific advanced practice on the nature of time. Same clinical language. This result follows from this practice, expected, repeatable. And the practical version for your life is this. Almost every significant outcome you have ever had was preceded by a stretch of internal preparation or internal obstruction that set the result before the external circumstances were even visible. The business failure that seemed to come from nowhere was preceded by months of quiet internal misalignment, broadcasting the result ahead of the event. The relationship that ended was preceded by patterns that made the ending inevitable long before either person admitted it. Which means your future, right now, is being shaped by the internal state you are running today. Not mostly, almost entirely. One of the hardest events in the book to wave away is the return of Sri Yukteswar after his death. Not a vision, not a dream. Yogananda describes being fully awake in a hotel room when his deceased teacher appeared, in a physical body that could be touched and held, for an extended conversation that he records in detail. The teacher explained the mechanism. The same consciousness that had lived in a physical body could, through a precise understanding of the relationship between awareness and matter, reconstruct a material form at will. Patanjali names this ability too, and lists it, without drama, as an advanced outcome of the practice.
Here is what that says about the body you are living in right now.
It is not the fixed, solid, deterministic machine you were told it was. At its deepest level, it is a pattern of energy, held in a specific configuration by a pattern of consciousness. Change the consciousness pattern deeply enough, and the energy configuration changes with it. And this is not only metaphor. Spontaneous remissions from terminal illness, documented, witnessed, medically inexplicable, are not just anomalies to shrug at. They are data. They are rare but real events where something in a person's consciousness shifted profoundly enough that the physical pattern updated to match. The book is full of healings that work exactly this way. Not at the body, but at the level generating the body's condition. Changed upstream, so the body updates downstream. The book describes a specific practice, Kriya Yoga, a technique of breath and attention that Yogananda's lineage preserved and passed down for generations. He calls it the most powerful method available for accelerating the development of consciousness. And the lineage makes a striking claim that this is the same inner science hinted at in the oldest texts, the same technology pointed to across the great traditions, known, preserved, and transmitted quietly for thousands of years, while the outer world received only the shell, the ritual, the doctrine, the institution. So, what is the actual technology underneath it? At its core, this. Your energy has a direction. In ordinary life, it flows outward, into sensation, into reaction, into the world through the senses. That outward flow is what generates the constant feeling of being a small person inside a large world of circumstances, subject to reality rather than the source of it. The practice reverses the direction. It draws energy inward and upward. And as the direction changes, the relationship between your consciousness and your reality changes with it. You stop experiencing yourself as the effect of your circumstances and begin to experience yourself as their source. Not as a philosophy you repeat, as a direct, felt, unmistakable shift in the texture of consciousness itself. One of the most misread parts of this tradition is the role of the teacher. We tend to read it through authority or dependency or religious devotion, and we miss what it actually is. Yogananda describes the real function of a teacher as the transmission of a state of consciousness. Not primarily information, not even primarily technique, though technique is given. The direct transfer of a state, so that your own deeper awareness gets to meet a fully developed version of itself. Think of a tuning fork. Strike one at a certain frequency next to a string tuned to the same frequency, and the string begins to vibrate on its own, untouched. The resonance is direct. That is why Yogananda describes being changed by his teacher's presence before a single lesson was taught. The state itself was contagious. And here is the implication that applies to you whether or not you ever meet a teacher. Environment is not background. The people you spend time with are not neutral. They are continuous, active transmissions of a specific quality of consciousness. The person whose inner state is chronically anxious, contracted, and small is broadcasting that state to everyone near them. The person whose inner state is genuinely expanded and clear is broadcasting that. You are being tuned continuously by the field of every person you spend real time with. This is not a metaphor about good influences. It is a mechanism. This one stops people cold. Yogananda describes samadhi, the deepest state of meditation, the state where the boundary between the individual and the whole dissolves, as structurally related to deep sleep. The tradition describes dreamless sleep as an unconscious version of the same state the advanced meditator enters on purpose. In both, the surface mind goes offline. In both, the separate sense of self dissolves. In deep sleep, it happens by accident, with no awareness, and you wake up rested but unchanged. In samadhi, it happens consciously, with full awareness, and you come back permanently different. The difference between an ordinary night's sleep and deep meditation is not the state. It is the quality of the consciousness entering the state. A trained awareness meets that deep silence with presence. It can work there. It can bring intention to the causal level and change the pattern at its source. An untrained awareness enters the same silence and experiences nothing, loses 8 hours and uses none of them, which reframes the whole practice of meditation. You are not trying to reach some exotic state. You are developing the consciousness that can enter the state you already visit every night, with enough awareness to actually do something there.
This is the one that lands hardest on anyone who has spent time in the manifestation world. Patanjali describes intention, sankalpa, with a precision the popular conversation never touches. He separates surface intention from deep intention. Surface intention is the conscious wish, the visualization, the affirmation, the goal on the notepad. Deep intention is the actual instruction being sent to reality by the full field of your consciousness, including and especially the parts you cannot consciously reach. Here is the problem. In most people, surface intention and deep intention are in direct conflict. You consciously intend to build wealth, but your deep intention, encoded at 9 years old, when your family treated money as shameful, or at 12, when you watched your parents fight about it, or at 22, when your first venture failed, and your nervous system logged that reaching for money produces pain. Your deep intention is to stay safe. And safe, in that buried definition, means never having enough to require the exposure that comes with it. The surface intention goes into the goal-setting app. The deep intention runs the show. This is why people who apply every manifestation technique still hit the same ceiling. The technique is talking to the surface. The ceiling lives in the deep. And the deep always wins, because the deep is where reality is actually being generated. The surface is commentary. Patanjali's entire system is built to reach the deep intention directly, to see it clearly and change it at the source, rather than chanting positivity over the top of it. That is the only thing that ever actually moves the ceiling. Which brings us to the fork underneath all of it. There are two ways to move through your life. Patanjali names them, Yogananda demonstrates them, and almost everyone you have ever met is using the first one. The first is personal intention, the force of your own individual will aimed at an outcome. I want this. I will make it happen. I have a plan. I will execute the plan. I will push harder if it is not working. This is the engine of the whole achievement culture. The person who gets up at 5 and outworks the room and measures the result every Friday and treats every setback as a reason to apply more force. And it works, up to a point. Up to the exact limit of your personal energy, your personal leverage, your personal ability to see and plan. And when you hit that limit, and everyone hits it, the only tool you have left is more of the same thing that already is not working. The second mode is what Yogananda calls acting from a larger intelligence, and what Patanjali encodes as surrender to a universal intelligence. And this is where the teaching loses people if it is not said carefully. It is not passivity. It is not giving up. It is not pretending you do not care about results. It is the recognition, not as a philosophy, but as a direct experience, that there is an intelligence operating in reality that is orders of magnitude larger, faster, and more capable than the individual mind. It built the universe. It runs every process in your body without you managing a single instruction. It is coordinating, in this exact moment, more variables at once than the most powerful computer on Earth could calculate in 1,000 years. And it is not outside you. It is the deeper layer of you, the field of pure consciousness beneath the surface noise. Personal intention is the wave trying to move the ocean. The larger mode is the wave realizing it is the ocean and drawing on that. And the practical difference is enormous and immediate. When you run on personal intention, all the energy you bring is self-generated. You are the engine, and you are a finite engine. You deplete, you plateau, you burn out. The results you reach are capped by your capacity to generate and sustain force. When you act from the deeper layer, the energy is not self-generated. It comes through you. You are not the engine. You are the channel, and the source feeding through you is not finite. Yogananda documents this in nearly every chapter, through events that look like coincidence until the pattern becomes impossible to miss. The right person appears at the exact necessary moment. The exact resource shows up from an unexpected direction. Obstacles dissolve before they fully form. Not because the yogi is lucky, but because he has learned to operate from the layer where these things are coordinated.
And here is a paradox you have to understand to reach it. The outcomes available through the larger mode are vastly bigger than anything personal will could produce. But they are not available to personal will. They require the one thing force cannot manufacture: genuine surrender of the outcome. Not perform surrender, not strategic detachment, real, bone-deep release of the specific form the result takes. Act with total commitment, give everything to the process, and release your grip on the fruit completely. Every time you grip the outcome, every time you check whether the money has arrived, whether the person has replied, whether progress is fast enough, you contract straight back into personal intention. The channel closes, the larger force goes offline, and you are back on your own finite engine, hitting the ceiling that personal will always hits. The result tends to arrive when you stop monitoring for it. Not because reality is playing games with you, because the monitoring itself is the obstruction. The mental construct of the gap, the space between here and there that you keep anxiously measuring, is the very thing standing between you and the result. Remove the gap, and the result arrives. Not as a reward for spiritual good behavior, but as a natural consequence of removing the block. That sounds simple. It is the hardest thing most people will ever attempt. Because personal intention is not just a strategy. It is an identity. The person who forces things into being through will is who you believe you are. Loosening that grip, even as an experiment, feels like dying. Because at the level of the constructed self, it is, in a sense, exactly that. The small self loosens its hold on the result, and something larger takes over. That loosening is the entire game. And everything so far, the mirror, the two intentions, the deeper layer, all of it points at one mechanism underneath. The one that determines the rest. Identity. Not your personality, not how you present yourself, not the story you tell about who you are. The deep, structural, below-conscious assumption about what kind of being you are and what level of reality belongs to you. Here is the mechanism, and it is exact. Every external result in your life is a projection of your identity. A projector throws an image onto a screen. The screen is passive. The film generates the image. Your identity is the film. Your life is the screen. And the image on the screen, your income, your relationships, your health, your recurring patterns, is the precise projection of the film currently running. You can change what is on the screen without touching the film. New job, new relationship, new city, new strategy. And the same image reproduces, because the same film is running. This is why the patterns persist. The lottery winner who is broke within 5 years is not simply irresponsible. Their identity, the film, is calibrated for a specific level of financial reality. When the external jumps beyond what the film projects, the system restores equilibrium, and the screen reverts to the image the film generates. There is the constructed self, the wave, the identity built by experience and conditioning, and every conclusion your nervous system ever drew about what is real and what is safe. And there is the deeper self, the ocean, the field of pure awareness that is the actual nature of every human being, without exception. The constructed self believes it is separate. It experiences itself as a finite individual in a world that is external and largely indifferent to its wishes. And that belief, not a philosophical belief, but a deep, structural one, wired into the nervous system, is the source of every limitation you experience. The ceiling on your income, the pattern in your relationships, the block in your creative work, all of them are, at root, expressions of the constructed self's belief in its own smallness and separateness. The deeper self has none of those limits. It is not separate from reality. It is the field reality emerges from. It does not experience ceilings, because it is the intelligence running the system. It does not experience scarcity, because it is the source all forms emerge from.
So the entire system of practice is built to do one thing: thin the wall between the constructed self and the deeper self, until the wave gets thin enough that the ocean shines through it. And as that wall thins, the projection changes, because the film itself is being replaced. This is the mechanism behind every genuine transformation in human history. Not better information, not more effort, not the perfect technique. A film change. A moment where the deep identity met something real enough to revise its foundational assumption about what is possible for a being like this. The practices create those moments, on purpose, repeatedly, and the accumulation of them changes the film structurally. The ceiling that was only ever an assumption in the deep identity stops holding. Not because you overcame it, because you stopped generating it. And all of this stays theory until you do the work. So here are the 4 practices that address the mechanisms we have covered. They are drawn from Patanjali's system and from the techniques Yogananda describes. And they are built to produce noticeable results inside 30 days of daily application. The first is the breath, the energy reversal. This is the foundation. 20 minutes every morning, before your phone, before any input from the outside world. The mechanism is the one we named. In ordinary waking life, your energy flows outward, into thought and reaction. And that outward flow generates the experience of being subject to circumstances. This breath reverses the direction. Sit upright, spine straight. Inhale slowly for a count of 6, feeling the breath rise from the base of the spine up through the crown. Hold at the top for 4. Exhale for a count of 12, feeling the breath descend from the crown back down to the base. That is 1 cycle. Do 12 of them. This is not only a breathing exercise, it is a direct intervention in the energy system, a deliberate redirection of the current, giving the whole system a taste of what it feels like to run inward instead of outward. Then spend the final 5 minutes in complete stillness, eyes closed, no technique, just witnessing whatever arises without engaging it. That stillness is the beginning of the withdrawal of the senses, which is the gateway to everything deeper in the system. The second practice is the mirror. Every evening, 30 minutes, paper and pen, no phone, no music. You are going to use your external life as a diagnostic tool to map your internal patterns. At the top of the page, write 1 external area where you are stuck. Income, a specific relationship, a recurring health issue, a creative block, a behavior you cannot seem to change. Then write the question: if this is a perfect mirror, what is it reflecting? And you write without censoring, without managing, without defending. Follow every thread. Ask: where did I first meet this pattern? What was I taught to believe about this area? What does this stuck point protect me from? What would I have to stop believing if this changed? The first answers will be surface, things you already know, things that feel true but carry no charge. Go deeper. Stay with it. Do not stop until you find the belief that has charge, the one that makes you slightly defensive to look at directly, the one you would rather not see. That belief is the film. What stays in the dark runs you automatically. What you can see clearly, you can begin to work with. The third practice is transmission. Once a day, 20 minutes, you enter a public place, a coffee shop, a workspace, a train, and you consciously hold a specific internal state. Not a performance, an actual state. You sit in the felt sense of genuine expansiveness, clarity, and goodwill, accessed through the breath, through dropping the internal commentary, through deliberately releasing whatever you were gripping before you walked in. Then you observe how people respond to your presence, whether the quality of interaction shifts, whether strangers meet your eyes differently, whether conversations open or close. You are training two things at once: the ability to hold a chosen internal state in the world without being pulled into reaction, and the ability to watch, with a scientist's detachment, the effect of that state on what comes back to you. This is where the whole framework stops being theory and becomes data, because you see, directly, that your internal state is not private. It transmits. It shapes what returns to you.
The fourth practice is the weekly intention, the deep kind. Once a week, 1 hour. Not the surface wish aimed at a specific form, this exact amount of money, this exact person, this exact recognition, but the deep intention aimed at a direction. For 60 minutes, you work on clarifying what direction is genuinely yours. What you would build if the outcome were guaranteed. What you would do if you stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. The thing that, when you imagine being aligned with it, produces not excitement, but a quiet recognition. A sense of course, that is it. That is what I am for. Write it, refine it, hold it. And then the critical step, release it completely. Write it plainly. I release attachment to the specific form this takes. I release the timeline. I release the need for it to look the way I imagine. I commit to moving in this direction with everything I have, and I release the result to the intelligence that actually runs things. Then sit in stillness for 10 minutes and genuinely let go. Done weekly, this recalibrates the whole relationship between your individual will and the larger current. It prevents both the burnout of pure force and the paralysis of pure waiting. And over time, it moves the source of your actions from the wave to the ocean. Now let me tell you what actually happens when you do this. Not the sales pitch, the honest account. Days 1 through 10, resistance. The breath will feel mechanical. The mirror will give you surface answers you already knew. The transmission practice will feel self-conscious and strange. The intention practice will feel vague. This is exactly what is supposed to happen. Your system is meeting something genuinely different and doing what systems do when they meet something different. It resists. Do not negotiate with the resistance. It is not a sign you are doing it wrong. It is the precise signal that you are doing it right. The first 10 days are a test of whether you will continue when there is no result yet. Most people fail that test. Do not be most people. Days 11 through 30. The first cracks. Something happens in this window that you cannot fully explain by coincidence. A conversation that opens an unexpected door. A thought that arrives with unusual clarity and turns out to be correct. A pattern you catch in real time in the middle of the behavior instead of 3 days later, and can choose differently for the first time. These moments will be small. Do not dismiss them. They are the mechanism beginning to work. They are the film starting to update. Days 30 through 60. Acceleration and its cost. This is the most disorienting stretch. Your perception starts to outrun your relationships. You see the structure of a conversation before it finishes. You recognize the pattern in someone's behavior before they have expressed it. You understand what is actually happening in a situation while everyone around you is still reacting to the surface. And you cannot say so without sounding strange or arrogant. This is the loneliness of seeing accurately, and it is not negotiable. Some relationships will not survive this phase. Not because you have become better than the people in them, but because shared reality is the foundation of connection. And when your reality shifts, and theirs does not, the connection strains. Some will break. Let them.
Days 60 through 90. Stabilization. The practices become habitual. Your mind begins to run the mirror automatically through the day, seeing the pattern behind an event without needing the journal. The breath drops you into a different quality of consciousness in minutes, instead of fighting you for 20. The intention practice starts producing results in the external world that are too specific and too well timed to dismiss. And then the real costs arrive. The comfortable numbness goes. Every technology of modern life, the phone, the screen, the noise, the busyness, is at root a way of not being fully present to the fact that you are alive. And this work dismantles it. You will feel more joy, sharper, and more loss, sharper. And the ache of wasted time, sharper. The felt sense of being alive increases, and it includes everything. That is not a side effect. That is the point. Your certainty will shrink. You will stop being sure of things you were once sure of, and fixed positions will soften. It feels like losing clarity, but it is gaining accuracy. Because the mind that can hold complexity without collapsing it is far more powerful than the one that was comfortably certain about a simplified version of the world. And the loneliness is real and ongoing, and it does not fully disappear. But here is what the book promises, and what turns out to be true. On the other side of that loneliness are the people who have also done this work. And when you find them, you will not have to translate or perform or manage the gap between what you actually perceive and what is safe to say. The relief of that connection is almost physical. Those relationships are rare, and they are worth everything the path costs to reach them. Einstein spent the last decade of his life chasing a unified field theory, a single equation that would describe the one force underneath all of physical reality. He never found it. He died without it. And what Patanjali described 2,000 years ago, what Yogananda documented through witnessed, notarized, published evidence, is also a unified field. not a mathematical one, an experiential one, a field of pure consciousness underlying all of physical reality, the way the ocean underlies every wave. A field that is not separate from the consciousness reading these words right now. A field that is, at your deepest layer, what you already are. You do not need to levitate. You do not need to appear in two places at once. You do not need to live without food. You need the version of this that applies to your actual life, the ceiling that will not move, the pattern that keeps reproducing, the gap between what you know you are capable of and what you are actually producing. That gap has a name in this framework. It is the distance between the wave and the ocean, between the constructed self and the deeper self, between the film you are running and the light that could project anything at all. Closing that distance is the only work that ever changes anything. And it is the work almost no one points you toward, because it cannot be sold in a weekend, and it does not produce the quick, visible result that builds a following fast. It produces something else, slowly, and then suddenly, a life that was not available to the version of you that started. Patanjali says, the results are not possible, not likely, but inevitable. For the person who applies this with full commitment and genuine surrender, the outcomes arrive with the same certainty that water flows downhill once the obstruction is removed. You are the obstruction. The practices remove it. And the only question left is the one that has been sitting underneath every word of this since the first minute. Are you going to go down to the depth where your actual life is waiting for you? Or are you going to find this interesting, feel something move in you briefly, and then drift back up to the surface where it is comfortable and where nothing changes? You already know which one you are inclined to do. The only real question is whether you will be honest about it. So here is the line in the sand. You can close this now. Go back to your ceiling and your recycled patterns and your comfortable stagnation, and keep working harder on the wrong layer of reality. Nothing will change. You already know that. You have known it for a while. Or you can decide right now that you are done living on the surface of your own life. If that is you, do one thing before you go. In the comments, leave 3 words. I choose depth. Not for the algorithm, as a declaration. Your first move at the level where things actually change. The line between the person who watched this and the person who actually went there. Most people will not do it. You already know that too.